It only took a few seconds, but those seconds would change everything. The old barn was burning. Flames cracked and roared, chewing through the dry wooden walls like they'd waited for this moment their entire lives. Smoke billowed into the early morning sky, black and thick, a warning to anyone nearby that danger had already taken root. Neighbors gathered from a distance, eyes wide, hands over mouths, helpless as the structure collapsed piece by piece. That's when they heard it, a tiny, desperate mewling. At first, most thought it was just their minds playing tricks in the chaos. But then it came again. High-pitched, panicked, unmistakable. A kitten, trapped inside. People looked around, but no one moved. Not toward the fire, not toward the sound. Except for one man. Daniel was only there by accident. He'd come to check on a friend's property after hearing about the wildfire warnings. He didn't expect to see flames devouring a barn, or a crowd paralyzed by fear. And he definitely didn't expect to hear the helpless cry of an animal calling from inside a wall of fire. He didn't think. He just ran. "Sir, don't go in there," someone shouted, grabbing for his arm, but Daniel shook them off. "It's alive in there," he yelled, voice cracking with urgency. "You hear it." He didn't wait for permission. Didn't wait for the fire department. Didn't even stop to worry if this was the right decision. His boots crunched the brittle, burning debris as he pushed through what remained of the barn doors. The heat slammed into him like a wall. Instant sweat, scorching air, blistering pain creeping across his skin. But all he could hear was that tiny meow. Inside, the barn was a maze of falling beams and burning hay. Daniel wrapped his shirt around his mouth and squinted through the thick smoke. The sound was louder now. Closer. "Hang on, little one. Just hang on," he whispered, more to himself than to the kitten. He ducked under a half-collapsed rafter and followed the sound to the far corner of the barn, where a rusted-out feeding trough sat against the wall. Behind it, a pile of collapsed boards, and tucked within, a pair of terrified eyes glinting back at him. The kitten was shaking, pressed so tightly into the corner that it almost looked like part of the wall. Its fur was scorched at the tips, ears pinned flat, too afraid to even cry now. Daniel dropped to his knees and began clearing the boards one by one, ignoring the heat biting into his arms. "I got you," he whispered. "I promise I got you." A beam overhead groaned. Time was running out. He reached in and felt the kitten tremble against his fingers. Slowly, gently, he scooped it up, wrapping the tiny creature in the front of his shirt. Its heart beat like a drum, wild and terrified. "Let's go," Daniel breathed. But the fire had other plans. Just as he turned, the ceiling cracked. A blazing timber came crashing down, blocking the path he'd entered through. Flames surged. The heat became unbearable. The smoke thicker. Choking. He staggered back, eyes darting for another exit. Nothing. No windows low enough to reach. No other doors that weren't already in flames. He held the kitten close, one hand shielding it, the other gripping his shirt around his nose. "I'm not letting you die in here," he murmured, voice rasping. "Not today." And then, a sudden burst of air. A section of wall at the back, weakened by fire, gave way with a splintering crash. Daylight poured through the hole. It was small, barely wide enough, but it was a way out. Daniel ran. He dropped to the ground, shoulder first, and slid through the gap, feeling the wood scrape across his arms and back. The kitten let out a single cry, muffled in his shirt. Then, they were out. He hit the grass hard, rolling once before coming to a stop. Coughing, gasping. He ripped open his shirt and held the kitten out with trembling hands. It was alive, eyes wide, fur singed, but alive. The crowd erupted into cheers. A woman rushed over with a wet towel, another with a water bottle. Daniel barely registered the faces. His ears rang. His skin burned. But his eyes stayed locked on the tiny creature in his lap. "You're safe," he whispered, tears streaming down his soot-covered cheeks. "You're safe now." But not everything was over yet, because someone in the crowd was filming. And that moment, the instant he emerged from the fire with a kitten in his hands, was about to go viral. / to be continued. The video of Daniel bursting through a wall of fire with a tiny kitten cradled to his chest spread like wildfire itself. By the next morning, it had already hit over 2 million views. The caption was simple. He ran into a burning barn for a kitten. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some thought it was staged. Others called him a hero. but most were just overwhelmed by the raw, selfless bravery of a man willing to risk his life for something so small. News outlets picked it up. Morning talk shows ran it on loop. By day 2, Daniel was waking up to phone calls from people he'd never met. Journalists, producers, strangers from around the world just wanting to say thank you. But Daniel, he didn't care about going viral. He only cared that the kitten survived. "Her name's Ember," he said softly during one interview, gently stroking her bandaged paw as she lay curled on a blanket beside him. Ember, a name born from fire. The local vet said it was a miracle. Ember had inhaled some smoke, burned a paw pad, and singed her fur, but otherwise, perfectly healthy. No broken bones. No major damage. Just scared. "She's got a survivor's heart," Daniel whispered, watching her blink slowly at him. "And now she's got a home." He wasn't planning on keeping her. But that changed the second she woke up from her first vet check, saw him sitting across the room, and dragged herself, still weak, across the floor just to rest against his leg. He didn't move for almost an hour. "She chose me," he said, "and I'm not going to let her down." Still, the attention kept coming. A national news station arrived on the weekend to film a feature about the rescue. They interviewed neighbors who recalled Daniel running into the blaze. One elderly woman cried while describing how she thought she was watching a man die in real time. Another neighbor simply said, "That barn can be rebuilt." But what he did, that's something no one forgets. But when asked why he did it, Daniel always gave the same answer. Because no one else would. And she deserved to live. The online world kept celebrating him. Art fan pages began sketching Ember in digital flames. A firefighter in Colorado sent him a patch and a handwritten note. Asterisk, real courage doesn't wear a badge. It acts when no one else will. Asterisk. Local children started showing up at his house with tiny bags of kitten treats. People offered to send donations for Ember's care, even though Daniel had already covered everything himself. But behind all the praise, Daniel remained quiet, humble, almost haunted, because while everyone was celebrating, he kept remembering the moment inside the barn. The fear, the crushing heat, the split-second decision that could have gone very differently. "I was scared," he admitted once. "I thought I wouldn't make it out, but I couldn't leave her there. That sound, I still hear it sometimes at night." He didn't want to be called a hero. He just wanted Ember to never feel alone again. Weeks passed, and Ember began to grow stronger. Her fur thickened. Her eyes, once clouded with fear, now sparkled with curiosity. She followed Daniel everywhere, sat on his shoulder while he read, climbed into his lap during interviews. And whenever the doorbell rang with another reporter or news crew, she was right there beside him. Then came a call that changed everything. A large animal welfare organization had seen the video, and they weren't just inspired. They wanted to launch a national campaign encouraging everyday animal rescue, using Daniel and Ember as the face of the message. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't looking for fame. But when they explained that the campaign would help raise awareness for thousands of abandoned animals across the country, he agreed. "If Ember's story can help another animal find a home," he said, "then let's do it." Soon, photos of Daniel holding Ember, now bright-eyed and full of life, began popping up in subway stations, magazines, billboards. The tagline read, "Every life matters, even the tiniest one," and people listened. Shelters reported an uptick in adoptions. Families showed up asking, "Do you have a kitten like Ember?" Daniel smiled whenever he heard that, because while Ember's scars were fading, her impact was only growing. But one day, after weeks of calm, a small envelope arrived in Daniel's mailbox. No return address, just his name and a handwritten note inside. It said, "You saved more than a kitten. You saved something in me too." There was no name, no signature, just those words. And Daniel stood at his porch, letter trembling in his hands, realizing that Ember wasn't the only one who needed rescuing. To be continued. Spring arrived with golden light and gentle winds, and Ember had fully transformed. No longer the trembling, smoke-covered kitten from the fire, she was a picture of life. Playful, confident, and impossibly attached to the man who had saved her. Daniel often joked that she wasn't a pet, she was a shadow with whiskers. Wherever he went, Ember followed. When he worked in the yard, she perched on a nearby tree stump. When he read in the evenings, she curled beside him, purring so loudly it could drown out the world. Their bond had become something bigger than either of them. and the world still hadn't stopped watching. The animal rescue campaign took off across the country. Ember's image, wide-eyed and fierce, became a symbol of second chances. Donations to animal shelters reached record highs. Volunteers poured in. Thousands of abandoned pets were rescued, fostered, and adopted, all because of a story that began with a burning barn and a brave choice. One morning, Daniel was invited to speak at a youth event organized by a local shelter. He was hesitant at first. Public speaking wasn't his strength. But when he walked into the school auditorium and saw dozens of children wearing handmade paper cat ears, some holding drawings of Ember, he smiled and knew he was exactly where he needed to be. He stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and looked around the room. "I'm not a firefighter. I'm not a vet. I'm not even someone who planned to adopt a pet," he began. "I was just a guy who heard a sound that broke my heart, and I chose not to walk away." The room fell silent. "That kitten taught me something," he continued. "That courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's soft. Sometimes it fits in your shirt pocket and cries when you're scared. But when you protect something smaller than yourself, that's when you grow the most." When he finished, the applause didn't stop for several long minutes. Back at home, life had taken on a peaceful rhythm. Fame had faded into the background, just the way Daniel liked it. Ember had a new bed by the window, though she rarely used it. She preferred Daniel's lap. The garden bloomed again. The land that once held the barn was now a wildflower patch, and in its center stood a wooden sign, carved by hand. "In this place we chose life." Visitors still came from time to take photos, to leave little gifts. A child once left a hand-sewn toy mouse with a note that read, * for Ember. From someone who was scared once too. *. But it wasn't until late summer that something truly unexpected happened. Daniel received a call from a woman named Rachel. She was a firefighter's widow. She'd lost her husband to a similar blaze 3 years earlier. And when she saw the video of Daniel's rescue, she said it felt like someone had reached back in time and pulled her heart out of the ashes. She wasn't asking for anything. She just wanted to say thank you. Daniel invited her to visit, and when she arrived with her young son, a shy boy who hadn't spoken much since his father's death, something shifted. Ember, usually wary of strangers, walked straight up to the boy, meowed once, and climbed into his lap. The boy smiled. Then he whispered, "She's not scared anymore." And that was the beginning of something new. Rachel and her son became frequent visitors. They planted sunflowers beside the wildflower patch. They built a birdhouse together. And Daniel, who had spent so much time focused on saving one small life, realized that sometimes healing works both ways. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees and Ember stretched lazily across the porch rail, Daniel sat beside Rachel and watched the boy chase fireflies. "I thought I saved her," he said, gently stroking Ember's head. Rachel smiled. "You did. But she saved you too." Daniel nodded, eyes misty. "She reminded me of who I wanted to be." As night fell and stars blinked into the sky, Ember curled up on Daniel's lap, safe, warm, and loved, living proof that the smallest lives can leave the biggest marks, and that sometimes it takes running into fire to find your way back into the light. The end.